Hey everybody, this is Robert from RCRchery, and the video that I'm going to do right now is going to be, I don't want to really call it an advanced technique, but it's just a different technique of shooting a hinge. So the reason I started my website, my YouTube, all this stuff is just put a lot of information out there. I want multiple different ways to tune a bow, shoot a bow, set a hinge up, shoot a hinge, release, execution, all that. I want a whole bunch of different ways because anything that I put on there, I've personally tried. And some of them work, some of them didn't. Some of them have portions of it that work that didn't work for me, with the rest of it, whatever it may be. So in anything you read on my website and in any method that you try, if you start seeing maybe there's some good to it, but then there's some negatives to it as well, and you have some questions about that, shoot me an email, let me know. Because odds are I probably already ran into that, and I can say, yeah, what you're coming up with there, try this instead, because it helps counteract that and it works really well. And the reason I'm bringing that up now is because the technique of setting a hinge up and firing it that I'm going to go through with this video is going to be completely different from anything that I've ever put out there. It's not really something that I coach or teach or go over with anybody else, because the majority of time with people, when you pick a hinge release up and you start to fire one and you start to use it, you're doing it to maybe combat target panic, anticipation, punching a trigger, thumb button, whatever it may be. And that's why you're using a hinge, because you need something that you can work through, to work a shot through, to retrain the brain, retrain your shot process, muscle memory, all that needs to change for you. What I'm going to go through today is basically almost the opposite of that, where I'm at a point where mentally I don't have a problem with target panic. Not to say it's never going to come back, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't, but at times it happens. So like I said, at this point I don't have any problems with it. I haven't in a long time, thankfully. What I do is I set up a hinge release to work for me based on the rotation. I don't work through the release. I don't add a lot of rotation to it. I don't pull through the shot a whole lot. I don't do any of that, because I don't need to sit there and just pull or rotate and wait for the shot to go off. I know a window when it needs to fire based on my shot timing, and I want it to work in that window every single time. I want to know when it's going to go off. Maybe not the exact moment, but I know a range of when it's going to happen. If it doesn't, I'm going to let down because I messed up somewhere and I'm going to start over. So just very simplistically, when you look at a hinge release, there's a half moon inside here. There's a lever that presses up against it. The lever rides across that half moon until it gets to the edge and it comes across. And that's all there is to them. They're very simplistic. They're very smooth. I love them. I'll say that over and over again. But when you're using them, they have a natural rotation based on the pressures that you put into your finger beds on the release. And if you will use that to your advantage, you can make a hinge release work for you instead of you working for it. And that's what, for me, helps me have a smoother shot, a less movement in my shot, and better groupings downrange. So basically, when I draw a hinge back with my method, the way that I prefer to shoot one right now, I use, percentage-wise, maybe 40% of the draw weight is on my thumb, 40% on, my index, and then the extra 20% on my middle finger. I don't do anything with the ring. It's up there. It just sits against the finger bed on the release. I don't pull back with it at all. I do all the pulling here, and what that does is it creates the hinge to be forward of its natural rotation, of its tripping point. So if you set that hinge up to where it's forward of its natural, rotation, to where when I let off that thumb, it's going to rotate a little bit, and I'm going to even out the pressures in between my index and middle finger, and then I'm going to set my ring finger on there and just add a little bit more pressure on there, and that's what it's going to do, and it's going to click. And then from that point, it's just going to maintain its natural movement where it goes through its range of rotation until it goes off. And that's keeping me from having it set up to where I anchor, I come off the thumb bar, and it's already past this natural point of rotation, and I'm having to add rotation into it. I'm forcing that release to go off if I do that. If you set it up before it gets to that point, you let your thumb off, It's still before it. You even out the pressures between the index, middle, add a little bit with the ring, and that's what allows it to just keep turning, keep turning, keep turning until it trips and goes off. I'm not adding pressure, I'm not forcing it, I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is letting the natural rotation through the pressures of my fingers run that release for me based on its natural pivot point of the release. And you know, as a side point, that was a selling point of the True Ball Fulcrum release. That's the one that Jesse Broadwater you know, designed and helped build. You can move the head of that release around on there, and you can change that pivot point. You can change how much rotation it naturally has, where it has it, based on how you want to hold it in your hand, the pressures you want to use with each finger, and all of that. And you know, that's a point that is probably overlooked by most people, or maybe not realized or noticed the right way, but you know, it's a big selling point in that release. But you can do that with any hinge. So I've got mine set up with a click. You don't have to use a click with this method. I used it for a long time without one. I've started using one recently just because I wanted a more consistent starting point. But basically what I do, I just draw it back to anchor, let my thumb off, and then it's just going to naturally rotate, you know, to go through to the click. And then I just allow it to, you know, keep rotating through its, you know, pivot point until the shot breaks. I'm going to pick my bow up. I'm going to get really close to the camera to where my hand is actually really close to the lens, and you can see as I shoot at the target the rotation through my hand. You can see that I'm not, you know, curling my finger up. I'm not, you know, straightening my index finger out. I'm not doing anything like that. It's just naturally going to go through the shot on its own. And that way you can see, you know, kind of how it works up close. So I'm going to get here, I'm going to zoom in just a tad because I really want y'all to be able to see what that release is doing. This first one here I'm going to talk through. It's probably going to look rough. Don't judge me on that one. And then I'll do another one where you can see it. So starting out drawing, a lot of pressure on the index and the thumb. Taking the thumb off and letting it rotate through to its, you know, while it's getting to its natural pivot point, and there's that click. And then at this point I'm just going to add a little bit more pressure into the index, or into the ring finger, and then I'm just going to let it keep going. And then, you know, as you can see, the release just rotates on its own. I'm not having to add pressure, I'm not having to, you know, increase it, nothing like that. I'm basically just letting it do its thing. I'm getting out of its way. That's the biggest part of how this works really well. How you can get a really consistent, easy shot with it is just getting out of the release's way. As you get out of the way on that, you just let it go. Once you start, you don't stop. It's a continuous process. You trust your float. You trust your, you know, your shot process. You just let it happen. Whatever goes on downrange goes on. So I'm going to do one more so you can kind of see it on a normal shot for me. Let me start over on that one. I already got to the click ahead of time. I'm trying to not hit the tripod on the camera, so I'm kind of contorting my body some. And there it goes. Widen back out here, so, you know, just kind of, you know, review on it. I mean, you know, like I said, it's not for everyone. You know, if you're fighting target panic, if you're still at a point where you're anticipating the shot going off, anything like that, don't set up your hinge this way. It's very counterintuitive, especially if you're in a pressure situation, because you are very likely to just freeze, because whatever you're seeing downrange you don't trust in, and you won't move. Your hand's just going to sit there. It's going to stay really rigid. It's going to have a lot of tension in it. You're not going to do anything with it, and you're never going to get out of the way of that hinge. You're never going to let it fire. But if you're at a point where you can trust your float, trust your aiming, trust your shot process, this is a very smooth way to shoot a hinge. This isn't saying that I carry all the weight on my index finger, because I don't. I do carry a lot of the weight between the index and the middle finger, have a lot of pressure through there, and then when I let my thumb off to let it get to the click, I go ahead and I still put a lot of pressure into that you know, my ring finger, because, you know, I believe in evening that pressure out, but at the same time, you don't want to set it up to where you're forcing the hinge to move to get through the shot. You want it to do its own thing. You want to just get out of the way of it. But you know, if you're at that point, you can use it. Hopefully this helps. It'll give you at least another method to try. See if it helps you with your shooting down range. If you have any questions about it, as always, I'll put my email down here in the bottom of the video. Definitely, you know, just shoot me an email, let me know, and you know, hope this helps somebody out.